Hello everyone. Today I am going to talk about cron jobs in Hybris. We will see how to create cron job or schedule a cron job in Hybris. So first let's understand some concepts about the cron jobs. The first question is, what is a cron job? A cron job is a timer or scheduler based program. It will try to do the activity in schedule way. For example, every week Sunday you want to send some promotions, then you can create a cron job. You don't need to run manually every Sunday. And every month salary is credited to our accounts. So we will get an email saying that the amount is credited to your account. So in those cases the cron jobs are created. No one is going to run manually a program that says send email every month. Or for example, every day we need to send some feed to external system, then we will create a cron job. So there are many cases you may require to create cron job so that it will run automatically the program. You don't need to run it manually. Next question is, what the cron job mainly contains? Cron job mainly contains three parts. One is cron job, and the second one is job, and third one is trigger. So if we take cron job mainly contains the runtime information. For example, session language, country code, and some other parameters are there where you can pass the parameters for the cron job. And another thing is job. The job contains basically the logic, the business logic that you want to perform part of your cron job. So what exactly need to do that cron job. And third part is trigger. When you want to trigger that cron job. So do you want to trigger every Sunday or every day? What time you want to trigger it? That's what you need to specify in the trigger. So basically if you see it here, the trigger basically triggers the cron job, and the cron job basically calls the programming logic, and that programming logic basically has whatever the thing that you are trying to do it. So that basically cron job contains mainly three parts. So if you see here, the cron job, we said trigger, right? So the trigger is basically specified with some kind of expression which is called cron expression, and the cron expression contains 6 or 7 parameters, and each of this parameter has some special meaning. So if you say star, the first star represents minutes, hours, day of month, day of week, year. So each of these ones represents some hours, minutes, days. So you need to specify what time the job need to run part of this trigger. So the cron job holds the business logic which is to be performed at particular times and intervals, and the job contains the actual business logic. So this job need to extend the Hybris provided class called abstract job performable class, or you need to implement an interface called job performable. So while writing a class, CronJob class, you need to either extend this one or implement this class, and you need to override some method called perform. Within that perform, you can write the business logic. Okay, let's see what are the different steps required to create a cron job. Basically, there are some steps you need to follow to create a cron job, and here you can see there are 5 steps. And the first step is you need to create a class. Let's say we call the xxxjob.java. This class need to extend abstract job performable and need to override the perform method. So within this perform method, you can write the business logic, whatever you want it. And once you create the class, you need to register that bean, whatever we created in spring.xml file. Once those 2 steps are done, then you need to perform and clean all, and then start the server and then perform the update by going to HAC and then create a cron job and trigger. So we will see in detail each of these steps, how to create and how to perform all these things. That is basically about the cron jobs, and it contains several steps. Now if you see it, Hybris provides some of the cron jobs already. Some of the cron jobs already provided. So for example, Hybris, there is a solar. There are some cron jobs like update, remove, full update. Like that, it will provide some cron jobs out of the box. And if you want to clean some cart removal data, then there is a cron job. There is a product catalog synchronization cron job. In order to import export, there is a cron job. So like that, there are many cron jobs. Let me show you quickly some of the existing cron jobs that are available in Hybris. So you can go to localhost HMC. We can go to localhost HMC and the admin password is Nimda. Now if you go to system and then click on cron jobs, and search for example full. Search for example full. So if you search here, you can see here there is a full apparel DE index, apparel DE UK, full electronics. So these are solar related cron jobs. So if you open this electronics for example, you see that if you go to timer schedule, so it is scheduled every day at 3 o'clock to run it. So if you want to change the schedule, you can change the schedule here. So instead of daily at this time, you can change to weekly or monthly, or once you want to run only once, or some specified interval. So you can define whatever the time frame you want to run that cron job. So like that, there are many cron jobs available. So let's go back and see some more cron jobs. For example, so you can go here. You can go here and search for all the cron jobs. So here if you see it, there are many cron jobs available here. So there are many cron jobs available here. For example, there is a synchronization apparel DE content catalog. So there is this one is not scheduled. This one is not scheduled. So there are some cron jobs available, but they are not scheduled. If you want to schedule, you need to go back to system cron jobs and you can define a scheduler, or you can through impexes you can define the schedule. So like that, I mean, you need to see whether there are some cron jobs already available out of the box that are useful for you, or you may need to go for completely a new cron job. You need to define some cases completely a new cron job. So we are trying to create a one completely new cron job in our session today. So the next thing is, what are the different ways to create a cron job? So the cron job you can create using two ways. The first option is using impexes, you can create a cron job, or using Groovy script, you can create a cron job. So if you go and look at in HAC, and if you go under scripting languages, there are different scripting languages Hybris supports. So if you go to HAC, and if you go to scripting languages, you can see it supports basically three types of scripting languages: Groovy, Bean Shell, and JavaScript. So using Groovy, you can create a cron job. That's what basically the option 2 is. So but we are going to talk here the option 1 for creating a cron jobs. Okay. So CronJob example using Impex, we are going to talk it. Now my scenario is I want to read the records from a table called training courses. For every 1 minute I want to read and display in the logs. I want to read the data from training courses and I want to display for every 1 minute. So this need to be part of the scheduler. So instead of reading from training courses table, you can perform whatever the logic you want it, but in this case, I'm trying to read the data from this table and display in the logs. Let me show you this training courses. This is already I created it part of this session. It's all, we are not recreating this table, but let me show you quickly what the table looks like. So here I am using SQL client to connect to the Hybris database, and if we see there is a training courses and it has the data basically. So I want to read this data part of my cron job and I want to display on the console for every 1 minute. So we will see that how we need to do it. Okay, that's our basically scenario. So now the step 1 is, let's discuss, we said 5 steps, right? Each step we are going to discuss a little bit detail. So the first step is I'm going to create a class called ChennaReddyTraining. I'm going to create a class called ChennaReddyTraining. Basically, I created a project called ChennaReddyTraining courses already using the ant-extgen, and it named as ChennaReddyTraining courses. So under that, I created a package called CronJobs, and then I created a new class called ChennaReddyTraining. So if you see here, ChennaReddyTraining is extending abstract job performable, and then it is overriding a method called perform method, which returns basically perform result. So here I'm using some kind of logger because I want to display in the console, and also I'm using the flexible search service to execute the query so that I will read the data from database. So here the first step is, basically if you notice it, I just logged some information and then I defined a flexible query. So I created an instance of flexible query and then I passed basically. So here I am saying select primary key, code, name, duration, amount from courses. This courses is nothing but the item type in the items.xml. So this is called flexible search query. In flexible search query, we don't use the actual table name, we use the item type. Let me show you that item type quickly, how it looks like. So if you go to Chenna training core items.xml file, Chenna training, not this file, let me show you that one. That is there in Chenna training. Resources, you can go to resources, Chenna training courses items.xml file. So if you see here, this is how you define a table in Hybris. So this is nothing but data modeling. So my item type is courses and my table name is training courses, which contains the 4 columns. That's what you see the table name as training courses. But while reading the data from this table, you don't specify the table name. You specify the item type part of the flexible search query. So that's what I specified here. So my item type is courses and I selected all the columns for that item type. Okay. Once I created the flexible search query, now I need to execute that query. So in order to execute, I am using the flexible search service which is provided by Hybris. So simply you can say flexible search service dot search and then pass the query. So this will basically execute the query and returns the search result which is of type courses model. So if you notice it here, I created the courses item type. So there is a corresponding courses model. That's why it's returning the search results of type courses model. Now I am getting the list of courses model from this search result. So you can say search result.get result, which returns a list of courses model. And then I am looping through each of this list course model and trying to get a record, basically concatenating all those fields and displaying in the console using the log. So here I am using the for loop. You can write in, there are different ways you can write the for loop. but here I am using Java 8 lambda expressions, which is a simple way. In one line you can specify the for loop, and this is logging the record that is reading from database. Once you done performing that logging, you need to return the result part of this perform method. So basically I am returning new perform result, which is an object. I am creating it and I am passing success and the finished as the cron job result, because this method is expecting perform result. So this is how you can create a job, and basically the job need to extend the abstract job performable, and you need to override the perform method, and here you can write whatever the logic you want. So instead of this one, you may call some service to get the result. So you can perform whatever the business logic according to your requirement. That is basically step one. That's what you see here. Okay. Next, step two. Step two is, so we created this cron job. So we created this class called ChennaReddyTraining. So we need to register that Java class in spring.xml. So ChennaReddyTraining courses spring.xml. You can go ahead and register like this. So I specified bean ID, and the class is, this is the class, and the package is this ChennaReddyTraining cron jobs. And then I specified these three properties. So if you see here, out of these three properties, only I am using flexible search service. So here I imported flexible search service using the @resource annotation. But why we are using the other two as a properties here? Because these two properties are used in abstract job performable. So you need to define those two properties also, because your ChennaReddyTraining job is extending this one, which is required these three properties. Even though you are not using part of your class, the extended class is using the other two properties which are required basically. That's what this step 2 is. That's what that step 2 is. Now, step 3, we need to run and clean all, and then start the server and perform the update. Let me stop my server. So server is running right now. So I am going to run and clean all. So this will compile the code and it will make it ready for us. So it takes basically some time to compile it. Let it finish that one. Now and clean all is completed. So you can see here build is successful. Let me go ahead and start the server now. So it will take some time. Let me start the server. Now you notice it here, the server is started successfully, which took almost 4 minutes. So which is fine. Sometimes server takes some time. Now we started the server. The next step is, so far we defined a job basically out of 3 parts. So we have 2 more parts. The other 2 parts are defining a cron job and then defining a trigger. So we defined a job. Let's go ahead and define a cron job. So in order to define a cron job, we need to write the impex, right? So this is how we can write the impex, and this impex we can execute from HAC. So you can log into HAC using admin nimda as the password. Then you can go to console, impex import, and here you can paste the cron job. So here what I'm trying to do is, I'm saying insert update the cron job, and then I said code job, and then I said single executable, whether you want to execute only one time this cron job or multiple times, and session language I'm passing. So I defined a cron job code as ChennaReddyTraining job, and the job name also ChennaReddyTraining job. Basically, I defined the cron job here. So you can click on validate and then you can say import. So it got some error. Let's see what is that error. So it got some error. Let's see what is that error. The error we got because I am missing semicolon here. So I just corrected the cron job. Now let's validate it and then run the import content. So this will basically execute the cron job. So I'm clicking on import. So now you see import finished successfully. Import finished successfully. Let's go ahead and see whether the cron job is created. So you can go to HMC, admin nimda is the password, system, then click on cron jobs, search for the job name that we have is ChennaReddyTraining. See here ChennaReddyTraining cron job is created. But if you notice here, the status is new and it's not scheduled because we didn't create any trigger yet. So if you double click on this one, and if you go to time schedule, there is no timer scheduled yet. We just created a job. So if you want to run it manually, you can run it. That's a one time basically, or you can define a trigger here. So you can create a trigger. So we want to do it through Impex, so I am not going to create a trigger through HMC. So right now the cron job is created, but it's not scheduled. So let's go ahead and schedule the cron job. So that's what basically this step is. Step 5, create a cron job and register the cron job so that it will run at the specified time. So I want to run the cron job for every 5 seconds. So in order to run the job for every 5 seconds, again you need to go to HSE console Impex, and this is the Impex to create a trigger. So insert update trigger cron job. What is the cron job that you want to trigger and what is the expression for that cron job? So my cron job name is ChennaReddyTraining job and I want to execute for every 5 seconds. So the cron expression is you need to specify like this in order to execute for every 5 seconds. So let's validate this one and now click on import content. When you click on import content, import finished successfully. Now our job should run for every 5 seconds. So now monitor the logs to see whether it's going to read the data from database and it's going to display here or not for every 5 seconds. So if you look at our job, main purpose is to read the data from database, which is from training courses table, and then get the data and log the information. Let's monitor here, see whether it's going to execute for 5 seconds. So now you notice it here. So it got the data from database. You can see here ChennaReddyTraining job is executed and it got the data like 10 Hybris 60 hours 500, 11 Fury 70 hours 600. This is what we saw in the training courses table, right? Let's go ahead and look at quickly again training courses table, and you see here data 10 Hybris 60 hours 500, 11 Fury 12 Java. So these are all the records, right? That's what you are seeing the records here in the database, which means the trigger is triggered and it executed the business logic and it got the result and we are displaying those results in the console. So if we wait for another 5 seconds, we should see this result again because our job is executing for every 5 seconds. Let's see whether it's going to display the result again after 5 seconds. Observe it here. Now it triggered again because it is 5 seconds is over. So it triggered again the job which got the result again and displayed it. So if you see here at the top there is a result and at the top there is one more result and here is another result because the timer is triggering for every 5 seconds which is executing the cron job. This is how you can create a cron job and schedule a timer so that it will execute at the specified time. Now let's go back to HMC and see our job. Go to System, Cron Jobs, search for Chenna. Now you see here, previously we were seeing the status as new, right? New, and this is not applicable. Now it's see finished and success because it ran couple of times. Just you can double click on it, and if you go to the time schedule, see here it is scheduled for every 5 seconds. So you can double click on this one. If you want to change the schedule, you can change it here, whatever the time you want. If you want to run like daily, and then you can specify daily at what time you want to run it, or weekly, if you want to run weekly, what days you want to run it, or monthly, how many times you want to run it, or free intervals. So you can specify the cron intervals if you want, like every 5 seconds, every 1 hour, monthly once, like that you can specify, or cron expression you can define it. So you can define even a HMC, or through Impex you can create it, or through Impex you can create it. That's what this step is basically. Step 5 is we created a cron job and we created a trigger for that cron job. So we saw the execution of those, and you can also see the cron job is created in cron jobs table. So you can go and query select star from cron jobs where p code like Chenna. So you can see a cron job also in the database table because cron job is a database table. So one thing you need to notice here is there are two ways again you can create a cron job and trigger. The first option is by going to the HSE platform using the impexes, and the second option is you can do it through essential data jobs. Basically you need to follow some convention over configuration naming conventions. So you can simply copy your impexes into this file and it will trigger automatically. So there are different ways again to execute the impexes. So now we saw the test cron job. We already see the result of the cron job. So we searched it and we saw already the result, right? So this was the result basically. So if you want to run it manually, so you can run it even manually because we already created a cron job with a trigger. There is no need to run manually. This is the result. And the next thing is, how can we start it? What are the different ways to start a cron job? There are different ways you can start a cron job. One is manually through HMC. You can do through HMC, or automatically, which means we created a trigger for the cron job. So that's what we saw it. Another option is you can use the and command, something like this, and run cron job -d cron job and then cron job name, or through using some Java code you can create the cron job and trigger. And how do we stop the cron job? Stopping a cron job, you can do these two ways. In order to stop the cron job, you need to override a method called abort in Java code. So basically you need to go here and then you need to override a method public boolean is abortable. So you need to override a method is abortable and then simply you can say return true. So when you override this method, you can abort or you can stop the cron job. And the another option is you can manually stop the cron job from HMC. Where to see the cron job? So we already saw how to see the cron job. You can go to HMC and then system cron jobs. That's what we saw it, right? HMC system cron jobs, and you can search for the cron job that you are looking and see the cron job. That's what this is basically talking here. So right now we are running for every 5 seconds, right? So the next thing is, how do we change the schedule? Sometimes you may want to change the schedule. Instead of weekly, you may need to run every day. So if that is the case, you can need to change the schedule. Basically you need to recreate the trigger, or you need to go and change it manually. So there are again different ways you can change the time or the scheduler. So the one way is you can take this trigger and then go to HSE and then define the new time. Let's say instead of 5 seconds, I want to run for every 10 seconds. So you can say change the time and then run the import again. So now it's finished successfully. Now the trigger is scheduled to run for every 10 seconds. That is the one option. Or you can go to CronJobs. This is another option. So right now if you go to the time schedule, you see here it's 10 seconds because we recreated the trigger again by changing the cron expression. Or you can go here and change the expression here and save it. So for example, if I want to run for every 15 seconds, I can say 15, save, and then you can close it. That's it, you are done. See here, now you are seeing every 15 seconds. So the cron job will trigger for every 15 seconds. That's how you can change the timestamp of the cron job if you want it. Okay. So I already shown this how you can go and change the intervals if you want it. Basically, it's a screenshot of that one. So if you notice it here, the cron expression. So I was specifying here the cron expression, right? Like 5 star star star. So each of these ones has a meaning. The first star means it's a seconds, which is 0 to 59. Second star means it's a minutes, which is required again 0 to 59 hours. Third star represents which is 0 to 23. Day of the month 1 to 31. And the next star is month, which is 0 to 11 or Jan to December. And the day of the week, and the last one is year, which is a optional. So here are some of the examples if you want to see. So if you represent the cron expression like this, which means every second, if you want to run for every minute, this is how you represent. So you can find it online or you can define on your own way for the time that you want it. That is how you can create a cron job in Hybris and schedule the cron job so that it will perform at periodic intervals, whatever the time you define. So let me recap quickly what we discussed so far. So we talked about what is the cron job and the cron job main parts, which are 3 parts: job, trigger, and cron job. And what are the existing cron jobs? So we saw some of the existing cron jobs like solar related cron job and catalog synchronization cron job. Like that, we saw already a couple of existing cron job that is provided by Hybris. And then the steps involved for the cron job creation. The first step is you need to create a class that extends an abstract job performable and need to override the method. Within that method, you need to write whatever the business logic. That's the step 1. And step 2 is you need to register that bean in spring.xml for whatever the project you have it. So this is how you can register the spring bean. Third step is we need to perform the and clean all. And then fourth step is start the server and perform the update. And the fifth step is we need to create a cron job and then create a trigger so that the job will execute. So we saw already creating a trigger and creating a cron job. Those are basically main 5 parts in order to create a cron job, and we saw these results also in HMC, the creation of cron job. So this is how you can create a cron job, and if you follow these steps, you can create a cron job and you can write your own logic according to your requirement part of that cron job. That's all I have for today for this about this cron job session. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.